Hello everyone. My first mini lecture on Disability Studies in Education, or DSE, will provide an overview of some key tenets of DSE. I understand this is not your first Disability Studies course, but I'd like to take a few minutes to re-ground us in some important concepts related to Disability Studies in Education and the schooling of students with complex support needs. My intention with these three modules is to apply the theory of disability studies that we are all very familiar with to the actual practices of schools. In this first module, I will provide an overview and roadmap for us, so to speak, and then in our next two modules, we will dive deeply in what it means to be a DSE practitioner. How does DSE disrupt taken for granted assumptions about disability and special education? And how can you create a school and classroom climate where disability is understood as one important thread of diversity and all students are welcomed with a sense of belonging? So the agenda for our first mini lecture will be guided by the 2012 article I shared with you, written by Ferguson and Nusbaum, titled Disability Studies, What is it and what difference does it make? We will explore 3 of the 5 core concepts of DSE outlined by the authors. 1, the study of disability must be social. 2, the study of disability must be interdisciplinary. And 3, the study of disability must be participatory. We will then examine 2 quote-unquote big picture practices that can be deployed in schools and classrooms when one understands students with disabilities through a DSE lens. First, imagining disability, and 2, creating a culture of inclusion and interdependence. To reground ourselves in disability studies for this seminar, I share with you one definition of disability studies offered by SDS, or the Society for Disability Studies. Disability studies recognizes that disability is a key aspect of human experience, and that disability has important political, social, and economic implications for society as a whole, including both disabled and non-disabled people. Through research, artistic production, teaching, and activism, disability studies seeks to augment understandings of disability in all cultures and historical periods, to promote greater awareness of the experiences of disabled people, and to advocate for social change. Now let's explore 3 core concepts of disability studies provided by Ferguson and Nusbaum. Concept 1. The study of disability must be social. For this week, you watched 2 videos as a simple refresher on the social model of disability. So while I won't spend much time on this familiar concept, I do want to point to the plain language resource on the social model that I shared with you. I recently came across this resource as I've been working to include more accessible content across both my teaching and research. But I also just find it to be a really neat way to share the brilliance of the social model with students with complex support needs. I also find it striking how much it aligns with the WHO definition of the social model, where disability is not solely viewed as a deficit or problem to be fixed, but instead is a complex interaction between a person and the social environment. And like Simi Litton in our Fist in Hand video from this week shares, we need to work to ensure our hands, i.e. educational practices, are flexible enough to quote-unquote fit a diversity of fists, i.e. our students. A second concept explored by Ferguson and Nusbaum is that the study of disability must be interdisciplinary. Similar to other established fields such as gender studies or ethnic studies, disability studies must be interdisciplinary in nature if it is to flourish and truly affect change in schools. As we will explore in the next mini lecture, special education has been king in the discourse of disability and continues to quote-unquote own what it means to educate students with disabilities. And because special education and other rehabilitative sciences have much ownership over the topic of disability, those fields have made attempts over the years to delegitimize disability studies in education. But if we intend for disability to be a part of the fabric of diversity, then its study must be interdisciplinary in nature. We must remember how disability has been dealt with through history. We must teach the disability rights movements across the globe. We must read literature by disabled authors. We must share the work of disabled artists with our students, and so on. The last concept I'm going to discuss is that the study of disability must be participatory. Students with disabilities and their families must be positioned as active participants in teaching as well as research. As Ferguson and Nusbaum note, this includes not only driving the questions that get asked, but determining who gets to ask those questions. This remains a tension to this day, particularly in the fields of both special and inclusive education, where many researchers and teachers are non-disabled. This speaks to questions of both access and power. As a non-disabled white woman who also is a disability studies scholar, I live with this tension daily and struggle with my positionality often. How do I do good work as an ally or accomplice while also holding space for disabled academics? How do I support and mentor my pre-service teachers who identify as disabled so that they are able to succeed and flourish as teachers? How do I ensure that all of my students understand the value of the voices of disabled folks, even young disabled folks, so that even those students with the most complex disabilities and/or communication needs have a say in their education, see themselves in the curriculum, and feel a sense of belonging in their schools and classrooms? To conclude our first mini lecture, I will now take a high level or broad look into two ways that this, i.e. disability studies in education, matters for teachers and in schools. In 2003, Linda Ware discussed the possibilities of imagining disability otherwise and the transformative potential of DSE scholarship on individual and societal attitudes, beliefs, and assumptions. Working with high school teachers, she used literature and writing to analyze disability representation while guiding teachers through a critical reflection process. So asking them and ourselves questions like, not only why is it a taken for granted assumption that Lenny should die at the end of Mice and Men, but also, why did my own teacher never ask that question at all? And what does it mean for my students with intellectual disabilities? How do I understand their humanity and intelligence? And how do I work to ensure non-disabled students see their humanity and intelligence as well? How do I prevent, quote, fixing practices from entering my pedagogy? And how do I actively resist so much of the interventionist curriculum prevalent in special education? Disability studies is a major reason we are even able to ask these questions. It allows us to ask different questions about disability while cementing disability as a natural part of the human experience. Disability studies also pushes inclusive education beyond just another set of practices or a program. An inclusive schedule is not enough. It's not enough for Jada to just go to music class with her non-disabled peers. True inclusion requires us not only to ask new and difficult questions about the meaning of disability, but to take action, to look at our schools, communities, and workplaces and challenge sites of exclusion. Inclusive education cannot be apolitical, and it cannot be ahistorical. A disability studies approach works to ensure a disability rights model remains central. Problematic special education traditions, which will be explored in the next mini module, must be torn down, and new inclusive practices must be reconstructed. What does it mean if a segregated classroom or a special day class exists in a public school? What students are placed there and why? What does it do to a student's education when she is followed by a paraprofessional or instructional assistant throughout her entire day? Disability studies tells us that it is not enough to technically put inclusive practices in place. Practices and schedules can easily be undone without an ideological commitment to an understanding of true inclusion and belonging. Thank you for taking the time to explore with me this overview of disability studies in education. Next, we will take some time to examine how DSE can help us critique problematic special education practices and instead create classroom pedagogical practices reflective of a DSE ideology.